Hello, everybody. It's Philippa here, and I'm jumping on to tell you all about book club. The shortlist is out for 2025, so this is your chance. If you want to be part of a book club, historical book club, then you can get to vote on which books we choose for next year. So the book club takes part in my Patreon, which is patreon.com/British history. And patrons who are already in there have suggested some books. They suggested 55 books. So I have whittled them down to 14 to be voted upon. So I've gone for a variety of eras, authors. So let's go through them, because even if you're not interested in doing book club, here are some very, very good recommendations for books for you to read. So the way book club will work is we have 6 books throughout the year. We meet every other month to give people a chance to obviously read the books and or listen to them on Audible. I also am very mindful of where books are available at which point in the year. So we do have some books that are either new releases or to be released next year. So I always look at that and order them in a way that makes sure everyone has access to the book for long enough to read it before the meeting. And the dates of the meetings and the books that will be discussed, or the book that will be discussed at each meeting, is available from that will be available from the end of this year. So people can obviously look at getting their books ready. So without further ado, let's have a look at the books that are going to be in the shortlist. So if you want to vote, you go over to my Patreon, patreon.com/British history. Obviously you have to be a patron, but that's £5 a month. And not only do you get to be part of book club, but you get exclusive content. So for instance, when I was at Belvoir Castle the other week, there's loads more photos in Patreon than I've shared elsewhere. I've been out somewhere today, which will go out on my social media, but patrons will hear about it first. They get early access to historian interviews, like my current one with Andrea Zuvic. That is out in Patreon at the moment. Everyone else has to wait. Also, they get them ad-free, and they get bonus material in those interviews, and they get the chance to ask future guests their own questions. But book club is what we're talking about today. So let's start off with these are in no particular order, by the way. And some of them, I don't know if I can show you. So these are suggested by patrons. But it turns out, I don't know if I can show you because it's actually a really, really big stack. Hold on. Oh God, I might drop it. Let's see. I already have quite a few of them. That's not why I picked them. Well, no, it's not why I picked them. There's various reasons why I picked the 14. Some of them I've read and I know they're really good. And I am also mindful of how much money books cost. And therefore, we want to make sure we're reading good quality books that are going to teach us something. And we do discuss that at book club. By the way, if you haven't been to a book club and you want to know what it's all about before you came to one, if you join my Patreon, then there are recordings of previous book clubs, so you can get an idea of what we discuss. We also carry on the discussion in a chat afterwards if people want to, or if they haven't been able to join. So right, without further ado, this is one that I actually have somewhere. Yeah. So Palaces of Revolution. This is Simon Thurley's book. It moves on from Houses of Power, where he goes through the buildings of significance in the Tudor period. And then here, clearly, we're going into the Stuart period. Fascinating because, of course, it starts in Scotland and brings us down, even discussing really interesting things that I found really interesting, like James the First, James the Sixth progress down through the country and where he stayed and the political impacts of that. So it's not just a book about places or about the palaces. It intertwines politics, relationships, everything that's going on at the time. And that is also available on Audible. That's another thing I try and see. It's not possible with all of them. So that's number one. We've got 14. But you can, like I say, make a list. Even if you're not going to do book club, these are some stonking ideas for books for you to put on your reading list. After Elizabeth. So this is a Leanda de Lisle book. And I haven't read this one yet, although I have it. And I've also got post-it notes. I think I've dipped into it. I don't remember reading it from front to back. Maybe I have. If I have, it's certainly due another read. And this is, of course, around the succession of James the First, James VI of Scotland, to the English throne after Elizabeth I. A done deal? Not quite. So, and Leanda's book covers that. So, fascinating topic, and one that is interesting to understand, but I would say important to understand, because this is the beginning of the link of the English and Scottish thrones under one monarch and the eventual creation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all the issues that have happened from that. But anyway, that's where that starts. This is a new book. So I've actually just literally today finished listening to Dan Jones' book on Henry V, The Astonishing Rise of England's Greatest Warrior King. And I have to say, it is an eye-opener. The tropes, the assumptions around who Henry V was, what sort of man he was, they're just laid bare in this book, and Dan tells it in such a good way that you are left to decide for yourself how you think, or what you think, excuse me, of Henry. In the epilogue, he does talk about how he's portrayed, how with the same evidence it's interpreted differently depending on your viewpoint. You know, is he cold-hearted, ambitious, brutal, or is he pious, a pious bibliophile who's genuinely trying to do God's work on earth? So that is a good one. What have we got next? Helen Castor's new book, The Eagle and the Hart. I haven't read this one yet, so if this one gets picked, I will be very, very happy. The tragedy of Richard the Second and Henry the Fourth. And of course, so this is around the usurpation of Richard II's throne by Henry Bolingbroke, who becomes Henry IV, Henry V's dad. So all these books, it's great because I'll have a mind to that as well when I see which ones have been voted on and which 6 we end up with. Doing them in some sort of order, which if they lend themselves to that, makes sense and help us to build understanding of the eras that we're looking at. I think that would be fun. So yes, so this would precede Henry V and actually overlap with Dan Jones' book about Henry V, because Henry IV, of course, is Henry V's father. So Richard II is deposed by Henry Bolingbroke, and he is incarcerated. He's eventually taken to Pontefract Castle, where he dies under suspicious and somewhat cloudy circumstances. So much so that in the future, the people are able to say he's still alive and rise up in, saying that he's going to turn up on the battlefield because he's still alive. But anyway, so this is Helen Castor's new book on those events. Next one. Oh yes, we're going right back to the Roman era, which I know there's quite a few people in my Patreon who love Roman history. Again, and I mean, Roman history, you look into it and it's the bedrock of so much that we're familiar with today. Here in Britain, our road network, as an example, but our law system, the just so much. So yeah, I actually do have this one in and signed by Tom himself, because I basically pounced on him at Gloucester History Festival last year. got him to sign it for me. I know this one is also available on on Audible. All about Rome's well, it says golden age. This is the the supposed peace, and basically what happens. It covers the building of Hadrian's Wall and all sorts of stuff. So really good. But Tom Holland is very, very good writer and very interesting on the topic of Rome. Then we have Nathen Amin's book. And you may have heard my interview with Nathen in the summer. I recorded it with him at Bosworth Battlefield, and it's available on YouTube and on the podcast if you want to listen to that, where Nathen was talking to me about his new book, Son of Prophecy. He was very pleased, I think, with the amount of post-it notes that I got in his book. Puts the it literally, he's called it Son of Prophecy, the Rise of Henry Tudor. Where does Henry Tudor come from? How is he the figurehead of an uprising, effectively, against Richard III? It's much more complex, deeper rooted than the idea that he's just the last sort of Lancastrian candidate that could. It's way more complex than that. Well, in it, but Nathen doesn't make it complex in his explanation of it. Very, very enjoyable book. Takes us back a couple more centuries before Henry Tudor. A description of rolling forward when Henry lands at Milford Haven, and his march through Wales, picking up support. By no means a given. So the bravery of Henry comes through, but also it lays out bare when Henry had these sort of ideas, this design on the throne, if you like, and therefore also when Margaret Beaufort does or doesn't. So it's this great book anyway, even if this isn't chosen for book club. I've read it, would absolutely thoroughly want to read it, recommend reading it, and would want to read it again myself. Oh, Anglo-Saxons, Marc Morris. Marc Morris is a very funny man, like as in humorous. He tells stories. In fact, I'm going to go and see Marc Morris speak in a couple of weeks' time at Cirencester. So I'm really looking forward to that. And it is on this book. So we've got Romans there, Anglo-Saxons come afterwards, but it's such a there's no progression. It doesn't sort of go Roman into Anglo-Saxons into Normans. That's how it goes, though. There's mix and match. But the Anglo-Saxon era is when we see kingdoms begin. Those kingdoms eventually uniting as an England, which then, William of Normandy can come and conquer a united England because it's there. But it only developed through the Anglo-Saxon period. Spans 6 centuries. You had the adoption of Christianity as the country's religion. So there's so much, where place names come from. So we have the Roman place names, but then we have lots of Anglo-Saxon place names, and it's all explained in this book. I think this is almost like a must read if you want to understand British history, because a lot of it begins here. So that's Marc Morris's book about the Anglo-Saxons. Oh, I'm a fan of this man. Uh, this well, I'm a fan of William Marshal. I'm sure Thomas Ashbridge is a lovely man as well, but William Marshal, the greatest king you can, greatest knight, excuse me, not king. He served 5 successive kings, and he over so he it's called the greatest knight, but the concept of knighthood developed during William Marshal's time, and he becomes known European wide as the greatest knight. Uh, he if any of you have seen The Last Kingdom, and Uhtred is a character that is loyal to whoever he is serving, he is absolutely loyal to, and that wins him the sort of respect even of his enemies. And I imagine William Marshal, um, it sort of makes me think of when I read about William Marshal, it makes me think about that Uhtred character, or vice versa, um, because he was loyal to whoever he was sort of working for, uh, and yet they were not they were fighting, there's infighting and all sorts of things. And of course he ends up being a key figure in the young Henry III's reign. So when Henry III comes to the throne at the age of 9, when his father King John dies, it's 1216, and Magna Carta, which was created in 1215, is pretty much gone, because um, as soon as it was sealed, King John appeals to the Pope in Rome to get it annulled, and the Pope complies because King John gives away overlordship to the country, and he he is a sorry, excuse me, and then he dies in 1216. In fact, I think the anniversary of his death is coming up soon. And with that, you have the very young Henry III. William Marshal, who has been serving King John, switches to obviously serve his son, his young son. And William Marshal is one of the men around the young king, pivotal in reigniting Magna Carta, issuing it, though this time not as a demand on the king, but as a royal decree, a royal promise of how he's going to rule, kind of actually bringing it back to the charters as they had been, a promise of how the kings are going to rule. But anyway, William Marshal, as Leanda says, I am a William Marshal fangirl, 100%, and I would love people to read about him and see if they felt the same about him after reading that as well. So, Yanina Ramirez, Private Lives of the Saints. I have a previous, I have the hardback from, goodness knows when I got this again. Oh, well, Yanina signed it for me in October 2015. My gosh, I've been at this for a long time. So this is Yanina, now Professor, I believe, Yanina Ramirez, The Private Lives of the Saints, Power, Passion and Politics in Anglo-Saxon England, which I think would marry really nicely with Marc Morris's book, if they both get chosen. I haven't read this one for a long time, but I would really look forward to the opportunity to read it again. Talks about of the saints, but as when they were real people, when they were alive, what did they do? How did they get to this idea of being a saint? And what were they really like? Real people. Really good book. Love this book. The Restless Republic, Anna Keay. So I've listened to this on Audible. I don't think I've quite finished it. So I'm getting particularly interested in the 1650s. So the Interregnum period, and the English Civil War period, because I think it is a period which we can see parallels to our modern day as well. I mean, I suppose you can actually do that with lots of periods of history, and that's why it's so exciting and so fun. But there's what Anna managed to bring over in this book. People united because they had the same enemy. What happens when they win? And it's a really in-depth look, really, at what happens once they don't have a combined enemy to fight against, and they're all looking for their vision of what would happen when they gain victory to come to fruition. What's going to happen? What happens now? So you've got people like the diggers who, you've got a starving country, and they think it's completely logical that common land is tilled by people, and food is grown. It's cheap, it's accessible. It's in repayment for the work put into the land. No, there's other factions who basically want to take over the landowning roles and just replace themselves in those positions. So the idea of a common land is not in their idea of what was going to happen next at all. You've got the rise of papers, newspapers, the media, adverts. You've got all sorts going on here. There are 3 brilliant books about this period out right, recently written and out at the moment. There's this one that's made it into our shortlist, Restless Republic by Anna Keay. There's also The Blazing World by Jonathan Healy, and I'm hoping to interview Jonathan in the not too distant future. So again, if you're a patron, he's one of the people you'll be able to put your questions to. And there's Professor Alice Hunt's book Republic, which takes you year by year through what was happening in the sort of the Cromwell's group, the Fairfax, and all of that. What was going on with them? This and Jonathan's book, I say, is more about what's going on in the wider country. If you want to watch the interview I did with Alice Hunt, that is also on my YouTube channel. What else have we got? Yes, Thorns, Lust and Glory by Estelle Paranque. Now, I actually had a reader's PDF copy of this. So it looks at Anne Boleyn's time, much more detail at Anne's time in France. So these formative years that Anne Boleyn spends at the French court, who she's with, who she's seeing, what she's reading, and therefore what she's learning, what are the influences on her which will feed in to how she behaves later on. And again, if you want to watch my interview with Estelle, there is an interview on my YouTube and on the podcast with Estelle about this book. Oh, this one is a little bit different to all the rest, and so for that reason alone, actually, I hope that it gets through. This is Illyria Lynn's book, Tuda Fashion, and it's not a dry sort of textbook as it may sort of first seem. There's lots around. It's in here, for instance, that actually before I read Nathen's book, but in here it becomes much more, or it's very stark, is Henry VII's spending habits. You can see that from Illyria's work and her book, just how he's got this. Henry VII's got this reputation as being a miser and a spendthrift. Well, not when it came to his clothes, actually. But you've got all sorts of wonderful stories about the fabrics, about their makeup. So what the Tudors used to portray, to project messages and status, all in here. So this I love this book. And again, I did an interview with Illyri Lynn. She is, so you can see that on my YouTube as well and podcast. Young Queens. So I have not come across this book before. I am very, very interested in learning about new authors, or new authors to me. Sorry, I'm. But this was it is, excuse me, been longlisted for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction, and Waterstones. Waterstones, sorry. So this is Lee Redmond Chang, Young Queens, and it's the story. This knits in very well actually with Estelle's book, because it's Catherine de Medici, Elizabeth de Valois, and Mary Queen of Scots, who would have lived together at the French court, and so that would be a very interesting look at those three women. They have enormous impact. Catherine de Medici and Elizabeth I had an ongoing relationship for a long time, and to find out a little bit more about Catherine de Medici in her own court, especially alongside Mary Queen of Scots, would be fascinating. And I think this is the last one. So this is cover to be revealed. So this is just my mock-up. This is Gareth Russell's book, which is due out next year, on James I of England, 6th of Scotland. It's when he was on tour with me, because Gareth is my tour historian. He was doing his final edits. He's told me some fascinating things which are going to be in this book, and then it was suggested by the members of my Patreon for putting into the shortlist for book club. So I'm more than happy that it is there. So those are the books that are up for voting on for book club 2025. There is one more book club. I'll go through them again in a second, but there's one more book club still for this year. On the 10th of November, we are discussing, so this stack behind me are this year's books. So these are the ones we've already done, but the top one, Hunting the Falcon, by John Guy and Julia Fox, that is our final book for 2024. So if you want to come along and be part of that book club meeting, we would love to see you there. You've got almost a month. Doesn't matter if you haven't finished the book. We have brilliant discussions anyway, and people come along even if they haven't finished it, just to sort of hear what other people have to say about it. So let me just do a quick recap, and then I will leave you to your Friday evening. So we have up for votes, Palaces of Revolution by Simon Thurley, After Elizabeth by Leanda de Lisle, Henry V by Dan Jones, The Eagle and the Hart by Helen Castor, Tom Holland's Pax, War and Peace in Rome's Golden Age, Son of Prophecy by Nathen Amin, The Anglo-Saxons by Marc Morris, The Greatest Knight, which is a book about William Marshal by Thomas Ashbridge, Yanina Ramirez's The Private Lives of the Saints, The Restless Republic by Anna Keay, Thorns, Lust and Glory, The Betrayal of Anne Boleyn by Estelle Paranque, Tuda Fashion by Illyri Lynn, Young Queens by Lee Redmond Chang, and Gareth Russell's new book, Queen James. So if you want to, obviously you could just take that list as inspiration for your own purchases, but if you want to come along and discuss those books with fellow history lovers, we would love to see you there. You can join at patreon.com/British history. It's just £5 a month. I make it as cheap as possible, so it's as accessible as possible. And not just book club, but you'll get a chance to ask historians questions when I am about to interview them. I will let you know as they're coming up. You get extended versions, which are ad-free, of all the historian interviews and all the other videos that I do, virtual tours, things like that. What else? Behind the scenes stuff, extra content. I try and give as much as I possibly can. And you do also get VIP access, so you booking access to my tours. So you always get 7 days to book onto a British History tour before it goes on general sale, which has been vital in the past. Especially, we've got a Catherine Howard tour coming up next September, fully booked within a week. So so there's that benefit as well. Everyone, I will leave you to your Friday evening. Thank you so much for joining me for this spontaneous live. I hope those books have whet your appetite, and I really, really would love to see you over in book club, patreon.com/British History. Love you long. Love you loads. See you later. Bye bye.